There's a book with a title so provocative, so offensive to polite society, that it has sold over 20 million copies worldwide. It has spent more than 6 years on the New York Times bestseller list. It has been translated into dozens of languages, and its title contains a word that most self-help books would never dare to use: The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Now, if you haven't read it, you probably think you know what it's about. You probably think it's about becoming a rebel, flipping the bird to the world, being indifferent, not caring about anything or anyone. You would be completely wrong, because the central message of this book is not about not caring. It's about caring wisely. It's about realizing that your Fcks are a limited resource like time, like energy, like money. You only have so many to give, and if you give them away to everything, every opinion, every insult, every expectation, every drama, you will have none left for what truly matters. The author, Mark Manson, opens the book with a quote from the poet Charles Bukowski. Bukowski's tombstone reads simply, "Don't try," not "don't care," not "be indifferent," but "don't try." There's a world of difference. Manson writes, "The desire for a more positive experience is itself a negative experience, and paradoxically, the acceptance of one's negative experience is itself a positive experience." Read that again. Let it land. The more you chase happiness, the more it eludes you. The more you try to feel good, the more you become aware that you don't, the more you fight against your pain, the more power you give it. But when you stop trying to be happy, when you accept that life includes suffering, failure, rejection, and loss, something shifts. You relax. You stop grasping. And ironically, happiness often shows up not as a goal, but as a byproduct. Today, we're going to break down the philosophy that changed millions of lives, the counterintuitive wisdom at the heart of Manson's book. We'll explore why constant positivity is a trap, why you're not special, and why that's liberating, why suffering is inevitable, but you get to choose what you suffer for, and how to stop wasting your Fcks on things that don't matter. This is not a book summary. This is an invitation to rethink everything you've been told about happiness, success, and what makes a life worth living. Welcome to The Subtle Art. Part 1. The Feedback Loop from Hell. Let's start with a question. When was the last time you felt anxious, insecure, not good enough? Now ask yourself, what did you do about it? If you're like most people, you didn't just feel bad. You felt bad about feeling bad. You worried about why you were anxious. You Googled your symptoms. You compared yourself to everyone on social media who seemed perfectly happy, perfectly successful, perfectly at peace. You told yourself, I shouldn't feel this way. What's wrong with me? Why can't I just be happy like everyone else? Mark Manson calls this the feedback loop from hell. It works like this. You have a negative thought. Then you have a negative thought about that negative thought. Why am I so anxious? Something must be wrong with me. Then you have a negative thought about that negative thought. Why can't I just stop thinking about how anxious I am? I'm so weak. And the loop tightens. The anxiety feeds on itself. You become anxious about being anxious, depressed about being depressed, insecure about being insecure. The conventional self-help industry, the one that sells you positivity, visualization, and affirmation, tells you to fight this loop, to think positive thoughts, to visualize success, to affirm your way out of your negative feelings. But Manson says that's exactly the wrong approach. The desire for a more positive experience is itself a negative experience, he writes, and the acceptance of one's negative experience is itself a positive experience. Think about that. When you try to force yourself to be happy, you are constantly reminded that you are not happy. The pursuit itself reinforces the lack. It's like trying to hold water in your hand. The tighter you grip, the faster it slips through your fingers. But when you accept that, you feel like shit. When you say, okay, I feel anxious right now, that's just a feeling. It will pass. I don't need to do anything about it. Something remarkable happens. You short-circuit the loop. You stop adding fuel to the fire. The feeling is still there, but you're no longer fighting it. And when you stop fighting, the feeling often dissipates on its own. The philosopher Alan Watts put it this way: trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. What Manson is pointing to is a truth that ancient philosophers understood, and that modern psychology is only now catching up to. Negative emotions are not your enemy. They are signals. They are data. Your anxiety is telling you that something in your environment feels unsafe. Your sadness is telling you that you've lost something that mattered. Your anger is telling you that a boundary has been crossed. The problem isn't the pain. The problem is the pain about the pain, the secondary suffering that comes from resisting what you're already feeling. Manson's first lesson is radical in its simplicity. You are allowed to feel bad. In fact, feeling bad is not just okay, it's necessary. It's how you know what matters to you. It's how you grow. It's how you become someone who can handle the inevitable challenges of being alive. So stop trying to be happy all the time. Stop pathologizing every negative emotion. Let yourself feel what you feel, and watch how much lighter you become. Part 2. You are not special. This brings us to perhaps the most controversial chapter in the book. Chapter 3. The title, You Are Not Special. Now, this sounds harsh. It sounds like the opposite of every self-esteem campaign you've ever heard. We've spent decades telling young people, you are special, you are unique, you can be anything you want to be. And the result? We have created a generation that feels entitled to greatness, but also crippled by the fear that they might be average. A generation that has been told they can be astronauts and rock stars and Nobel Prize winners, and then feels like a failure when they end up in a perfectly respectable, perfectly ordinary job. Manson points out something obvious that we somehow forgot. Most of us are average at most things. Even if you're exceptional at one thing, say, you're a talented musician or a brilliant surgeon, you're probably average or below average at everything else. That's not an insult. That's statistics. That's the bell curve of human existence. The problem is, we don't see the bell curve anymore. We see the extremes. Social media shows us the best of the best and the worst of the worst. The richest, the most beautiful, the most successful, the most tragic. And we scroll through these images, comparing our average Tuesday to someone's highlight reel, and we feel like failures. But here's the truth that sets you free. You are not special, and that's okay. In fact, it's liberating, because once you accept that you're average, you can stop trying to prove that you're exceptional. You can stop performing. You can stop pretending, and you can start actually improving, not because you need to prove something to the world, but because you genuinely want to get better at something that matters to you. Manson writes, people who become great at something become great because they understand that they're not already great, they are mediocre, they are average, and that they could be so much better. Think about the people you admire, the ones who have truly achieved something extraordinary. Did they wake up one day and decide they were special? Or did they wake up every day for years, doing unglamorous, repetitive work, slowly getting better? The delusion of specialness is a prison. It tells you that you should already be there, and since you're not, something must be wrong with you. It makes you afraid to try, because trying might prove you're not as special as you hoped. The acceptance of ordinariness is the key. It frees you to fail. It frees you to learn. It frees you to do the boring work that actually leads to growth. Manson shares a story about a young musician who came to him for advice. The musician was talented, but frustrated. He wasn't getting the recognition he felt he deserved. He thought he was special and the world wasn't acknowledging it. Manson's advice was blunt: you're not special, and that's great. Now you can stop waiting for the world to discover you and start doing the work to improve yourself. The musician didn't like the advice, but those who hear it and take it to heart, they're the ones who eventually become something. Not because they were born special, because they were willing to be ordinary and work anyway. Part 3. The value of suffering, the Hiroo Onoda story. To understand what Manson is really saying about meaning, suffering, and values, we need to look at one of the most remarkable and tragic stories he tells in the book, the story of Hiroo Onoda. In 1944, Onoda was a young Japanese soldier sent to a small island in the Philippines called Lubang. His orders were simple: do whatever it takes to survive, conduct guerrilla warfare, and never surrender. He was told that help would come. He was told that others would eventually arrive to relieve him. He was told that surrender was a fate worse than death. The war ended in 1945, but Onoda didn't know that, or rather, he refused to believe it. When he saw leaflets announcing the end of the war, he assumed they were enemy propaganda. When rescue parties came, he hid from them. When his own countrymen tried to convince him, he refused to listen. For 29 years, Hiroo Onoda lived in the jungle. He survived on bananas and coconuts. He killed local cows for food. He even shot at local police and farmers, believing they were enemy soldiers. Finally, in 1974, a young Japanese college student named Norio Suzuki traveled to the island specifically to find Onoda. He succeeded. They became friends. Suzuki returned with Onoda's former commanding officer, who formally relieved him of his duty. Onoda emerged from the jungle in his tattered uniform, his rifle still in working order. He had been fighting a war that had ended 3 decades earlier. Now, here's the question Manson asks: was Onoda's suffering meaningful? He certainly suffered. He endured isolation, starvation, disease, and constant danger. But was it worth it? He had dedicated his life to a cause, loyalty to the emperor and to his country, that the rest of the world had moved past. Manson writes, if suffering is inevitable, if our problems in life are unavoidable, then the question we should be asking is not how do I stop suffering, but why am I suffering, for what purpose? Onoda suffered for loyalty. That was his value. And by his own account, he didn't regret it. He believed he had fulfilled his duty. But the point is not to judge Onoda. The point is this: the value determined the suffering. Everyone suffers. The question is not how to eliminate suffering that's impossible. The question is what you are willing to suffer for. If you're suffering for something meaningful, a cause you believe in, a person you love, a craft you're dedicated to, a value you hold sacred, then the suffering is bearable. It even becomes noble. It gives your life shape and purpose. But if you're suffering for nothing, if you're suffering because you're chasing approval, or status, or things you don't even want, if you're suffering because you're avoiding the hard choices that would actually make you happy, then the suffering is just pain, wasted pain. Manson writes, everything worthwhile in life is won through surmounting the associated negative experience. Any attempt to escape the negative, to avoid it, or quash it, or silence it, only backfires. This is why the question, what do you want out of life, is not the right question. The right question is, what are you willing to struggle for? Because the joy of a deep relationship is not the absence of conflict, it's the willingness to work through conflict. The satisfaction of a meaningful career is not the absence of stress, it's the willingness to take on challenges. The pride of creating something is not the absence of failure, it's the willingness to fail and keep going. So stop asking how to avoid suffering. Start asking what suffering you want to sign up for, because that choice is what makes a life worth living. Part 4, Choosing Your Fcks. This brings us to the central practical question of the book. What do you actually give a Fck about? Because whether you realize it or not, you are always choosing. Every day, you decide where to invest your limited reserves of attention, emotion, and energy. The problem is that most people make these choices unconsciously. They react to whatever is loudest, whatever is most urgent, whatever triggers their anxiety or their fear of missing out. They scatter their Fcks across 100 different things and end up with nothing left for what truly matters. Manson writes, the key to a good life is not giving a Fck about more things. It's giving a Fck about fewer things, and giving a Fck about the right things. This is the subtlety in the title. The art is subtle because it's not about becoming indifferent to everything. It's about becoming selective. It's about learning to distinguish between the things that deserve your attention and the things that don't. Let me give you some examples. Give a Fck about your integrity, the people who truly love you, the work that matters to you, your physical and mental health, your values even when they're inconvenient. Stop giving a Fck about what strangers think of you, the curated highlight reels on social media, arguments with people who will never change their minds, the news cycle that will be irrelevant in a week, the insult someone muttered 5 years ago, your fear of being judged. Notice something. The things on the first list are things you can actually do something about. Your integrity, you can choose to act with honesty today. The people who love you, you can call them. Your work, you can take one small step. The things on the second list, you can't control them. You can't control what strangers think. You can't control the algorithm. You can't control other people's opinions. This is the Stoic heart of Manson's philosophy. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus wrote nearly 2,000 years ago, some things are in our control and others are not. Give your Fcks to what you can control. Let go of what you cannot. This sounds simple, But it's one of the hardest things a human being can do, because we are wired to care about what others think. We are wired to want approval. We are wired to fear rejection. But every FCK you give to something you can't control is a FCK, stolen from something you can. Manson writes, maturity is what happens when one learns to only give a FCK about what's truly FCK worthy. Part 5, the do something principle. So you've chosen what to give a FCK about. Now comes the hard part, actually doing something about it. Most people believe in a chain of causation that looks like this. Inspiration, motivation, action. You wait until you feel inspired. Then you feel motivated. Then you act. This model is backwards, and it's the reason most people stay stuck for years. Manson proposes the do something principle. The real chain is action, inspiration, motivation. Start with the smallest possible action even if you don't feel like it. That action creates momentum. Momentum creates inspiration. Inspiration feels like motivation. If you're stuck on a problem, Manson writes, don't sit there and think about it. Just start working on it. Even if you don't know what you're doing, the simple act of working on it will eventually cause the right ideas to show up in your head. Let me give you a real example. You want to write a book. You've been wanting to write a book for years, but every time you sit down, you feel blocked. You don't know where to start. You don't feel inspired, so you don't write. The do something principle says, stop waiting to feel inspired. Write one sentence. Any sentence. It can be a terrible sentence. It can be, I don't know what to write, but write something. That one sentence is action. That action creates a tiny spark of momentum. The momentum makes the next sentence slightly easier. And before you know it, you've written a paragraph, then a page, then a chapter. This works because of how your brain is wired. Your brain doesn't like cognitive dissonance. When you act like a writer, even for 5 minutes, your brain thinks, I'm acting like a writer. I must be a writer. And that identity shift makes it easier to keep writing. The same is true for exercise, for creative work, for difficult conversations, for anything you've been avoiding. You don't wait until you feel like going to the gym. You go to the gym and the feeling follows. You don't wait until you feel like having the hard conversation. You have the conversation and the relief follows. You don't wait until you feel like starting the project. You start the project and the motivation follows. Manson is blunt about this. The truth is that feeling motivated is a luxury that most people can't afford. If you wait until you're inspired to act, you'll be waiting a long time. Action isn't just the effect of motivation, it's the cause of it. So stop waiting, stop analyzing, stop planning. Just do something, anything, the smallest possible thing, and let momentum take over from there. Part 6, Boundaries and Responsibility. There's another layer to Manson's philosophy that often gets overlooked. It's about boundaries and responsibility specifically. The responsibility to say no. One of the most liberating ideas in the book is this. You are responsible for everything that happens in your life, but you are not responsible for other people's reactions. Let me explain. Many people stay trapped in cycles of people-pleasing, guilt, and resentment because they believe they are responsible for how others feel. If I say no, they'll be disappointed. If I set a boundary, they'll be angry. If I prioritize myself, they'll think I'm selfish. But here's the truth. You are not responsible for managing other people's emotions. You are responsible for your own choices. And their feelings about your choices, those belong to them. Manson writes, you cannot be responsible for other people's problems if you're not the one causing them. You can be compassionate, you can be helpful, but you cannot be responsible. This is the difference between responsibility and responsibility. You have the ability to respond to other people's needs. You can choose to help. That's kindness. But you are not responsible for fixing everyone else. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Learning to say no clearly, kindly, without over-explaining, is one of the most important skills in the subtle art, because every time you say yes to something you don't want to do, you're saying no to yourself. You're giving a FCK about something that doesn't deserve it. The psychologist Dr. Nedra Glover Torwab, author of Set Boundaries, Find Peace, puts it this way: boundaries are not walls, they are gates. You decide who comes in, how long they stay, and what behavior is allowed. When you set a boundary, some people will be disappointed. They may get angry. They may pull away. Let them. Their disappointment is not your responsibility. Your peace is. Part 7, And Then You Die. The final chapter of Manson's book is titled simply, And Then You Die. It sounds morbid. It sounds like the last thing you want to read in a self-help book. But Manson argues that contemplating your own mortality is perhaps the only thing capable of helping you keep all your other values in proper perspective. Here's a thought experiment. Imagine you knew with absolute certainty that you had 1 year left to live. What would you stop doing? What arguments would you stop having? What grudges would you drop? What fears would you finally face? Now imagine you had 5 years, 10, 20. The point is not to terrify you. It's to clarify. Because when you know you're going to die, the petty grievances fade. The need for approval dissolves. The fear of embarrassment vanishes. You stop wasting your Fcks on things that don't matter. Because you can feel the clock ticking, Manson writes, the knowledge that you are going to die is the only thing that can give you the courage to actually live. This is not new. The Stoics called it memento mori, remember that you will die. They didn't say this to be depressing. They said it to be liberating. When you remember that your time is finite, you stop trading it for things that don't matter. You stop saying yes to people who don't respect your time. You stop avoiding the hard conversations. You stop pretending. You have forever to do the things that matter. The philosopher Martin Heidegger called this being toward death. He argued that most people live in a state of they doing what they do, caring what they think, following the path that they have laid out. But when you confront your own mortality, you stop being they and start being you. You choose your own values. You define your own success. You give your Fcks to what you believe matters, not what the world tells you should matter. So here's the question. If you knew you were going to die, what would you stop giving a Fck about today? And what would you start giving a Fck about instead? Conclusion, your limited Fcks. Let's come back to where we started. You have a limited number of Fcks to give. You have a limited amount of time. You have a limited amount of energy. And every day, you face a choice about where to invest them. You can invest them in the feedback loop from hell, in worrying about what strangers think, in chasing an impossible ideal of constant happiness, in proving that you're special, in suffering for things that don't matter. Or you can invest them wisely, in your values, in the people who love you, in the work that gives you meaning, in the discomfort that leads to growth, in the acceptance of your own mortality, and the courage to live fully before you die. The subtle art is called subtle for a reason. It's not about becoming a nihilist who cares about nothing. It's about becoming a person who cares deeply about the right things. It's about learning to say, this matters, this doesn't, this deserves my energy, this does not. I will suffer for this. I will not suffer for that. And then living by those choices every day until you die. Mark Manson writes at the end of his book, don't hope for a life without problems. Hope for a life with good problems. Because the problems never go away. The suffering never ends. The struggle is the price of admission for anything worthwhile. But you get to choose which problems you solve, which suffering you endure, which struggle you sign up for. That choice is your freedom. That choice is your life. So give your Fcks wisely. You only get so many. You are going to die someday. Everyone you know is going to die soon. And in your short life, you only have a certain amount of Fcks to give. Give them to what matters. If this video resonated with you, share it with someone who needs permission to stop caring about the wrong things. Subscribe for more deep dives into philosophy, psychology, and the art of living. I'll see you in the next one.